Welcome to the Next Level Podcast, powered by San Manuel, a series connecting you with the best minds in casino, hospitality, tribal government, and beyond. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. It's Kenji Hall here for the Next Level Podcast. I am excited today, and usually my guest today is on the side that I'm on, where he gets to be the person interviewing. But today, it's my day to be able to interview our Vice President of Property Marketing, Kyle Anderson. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Kenji, thank you. Just thank you for having me on. To your point, number one, I understand the level of guests we've had on this from yourself, authors and athletes and people who are really leading the space in casino, hospitality, entertainment, and beyond. And two, I feel some pressure. So if this starts to go sideways, I'm just going to start interviewing you. So get ready for that.
Oh, stop. Yeah, I think sometimes it's easier to be the person asking the questions and answering. But typically how I've always watched these podcasts and how we've kind of run through these is it becomes so conversational, you forget who's talking about what. Right. But I do get to ask a question right off the bat because I want to make sure the world knows who Kyle Anderson is. And as we typically start our podcast, we want to make sure that we give you a little bit of time to tell your origin story so that people understand who you are, where you came from. So can you start us off with that?
Absolutely. I'll try my best to keep it to 3 minutes. So Kyle Anderson, VP of Property Marketing here for Yaamava. Born and raised in Arizona, specifically grew up in the Mesa, Chandler area. Lived there most of my life. I'm the youngest of three. I feel like that's an advantage. I tell a lot of people being the youngest because you're kind of just naturally in observe mode. And I'm kind of noticing that as a parent. My mom and dad both worked really hard. Unfortunately, but it was a good thing. They got divorced, but they had really different upbringings. My dad, small town, Midwest, my mom, bigger city, Arizona. And just, I think that really helped shape my kind of empathetic lens of trying to understand different perspectives. Was really into sports, especially around Jordan. I'm sure people can relate. 95, when he came back with the 4-5, I was just hooked. So I would just be outside shooting baskets all day. So I played basketball all through high school, other sports as well. I played football my freshman year. So sports was really foundational for me. Had a knee injury that was a setback, tore my ACL and meniscus, fought my way back to that to play my senior year. So that taught me a lot about grit. And then like a lot of young people, where do I go to college? Do I want to go to college? I ended up going to Northern Arizona University. So that is just in Flagstaff. D1, but a smaller school. Flagstaff's an amazing town. Didn't know what I wanted to do. At first, I played with maybe being a physical therapist, talked about my knee injury. I thought that was really empowering, seeing people. Criminal justice was interesting to me. That was my original major, but I ended up what I do today, which is marketing. I was just naturally drawn. I know, Kenji, you talk a lot about following your passion. That was the one class I was just like naturally in tune with. Like it was just so consuming to me, understanding product mix, advertising, guest experience, logistics of product, just all that stuff. And didn't know what I wanted to do out of college. Started in the family business. So I'm a proud tribal member of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. My sister works there in sales still to this day, is very successful. And she was there. So I thought, give it a shot until I figure out what I want to do. And like a lot of us, you get hooked to the energy and everything that is the casino and hospitality business. Started in guest services for 6 months, worked all 3 shifts, worked my way up through the marketing vertical, through coordinator, specialist, manager, mainly on the advertising side. But we were a really small team. So I think that was really beneficial for me, working with database and promotions and casino marketing and player development. I got to really learn. And as being a tribal member, I had the access of doing special programs. I met someone by the name of Peter Arceo, who was then the senior director of marketing. He put me through a program specialized where I would shadow every single department. It took me 2.5 years to finish, but it was really foundational for me to understand the operations of casino and marketing. Peter left in 2015. When you work for Peter, you just kind of naturally want to keep innovating. So I got into podcast funny in 2015. I had this thought of there's not a lot in the casino space as far as podcasts go. It'd be really cool if there was something out there. So it's funny how the way serendipity works. One of the early podcasts too that I listened to was Gary Vee. So serendipity again. So 2015, he's one of the first 10 podcasts I listened to. 9 years later, we're partnering with VaynerMedia. And, I took advantage of every program, did the executive development program in UNLV, which was huge for me. Eventually got to the spot in my career where, I just felt like I needed a change. And, I'd heard that all the success of San Manuel Casino at the time, I knew that they were growing. Peter put a word in for me. He was then the GM to interview with the CMO. I did several interviews, one with you too. I did some singing. I did all kinds of things. Got the position. And then I've been here for the last 5 years in those roles. Director of Property Marketing, Director of Casino Executive Communications, and also now for the last almost 2 years now, which is crazy, Vice President of Property Marketing, overseeing promotions and events, guest services, VIP services, and property marketing, which essentially is advertising and media with the shared values team. So that was a lot. I riffed through it. I'm also happily married to my wife, Jennifer. I have 4 kids. Without her, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I've worked really hard, but it's not without her support and her guidance, I wouldn't be here. So I'm really fortunate. So that was probably more like 5 minutes, but I tried my best.
That's okay. There's so much to unpack there. Like, I have so much to talk about. So I'm going to start with where you started early on. You talk about tearing your ACL and MCL and your meniscus there and having to go through a process of rebuilding. I think that tenaciousness also works in the form of business. How do you describe that process of, knowing that you're going to have setbacks and continue to move forward? How do you get your mind in the right space for that?
I think a lot of it, why that was so foundational for me and why it still serves me today is, you hear the concept of people who are confident. I believe that for 95% of us, and I think there's studies, I can't cite them, but 95% of us, confidence is built. And for me, that setback was a true confidence builder because I was just floating around, just loving basketball, kind of loving life. But I also had this kind of thought of like, what am I going to do after this? I know I'm probably not going to go play college ball. I spend a lot of time here. I'm passionate about it, and then boom, tore ACL meniscus in half and you have that surgery and there's just tremendous doubt, right? You get out of surgery. And anyone who's gone through injuries, I understand now why athletes do all these documentaries when they have an injury. You have one with Aaron Rodgers, you had RG3, Carson Palmer, because it truly is almost like a rebuild. You can't walk. You start from ground zero. You kind of have to learn how to run again, build up strength. So for me, more than anything else, it helped me develop grit. There was tremendous doubt, but I learned that if you stack the days, and, you focus on the controllables, which is every day I'm just going to rehab as hard as I can, ice, recover, and then to be on the other side of that, to actually make it back to play. It was truly foundational for me. And another thing that was huge for me too, it wasn't so much things that I did on the court, but for me, my proudest moment was we ran the mile going into my senior season. And that was just a few months after I'd been cleared to play. And I ran the fastest mile. And I'm not a runner. I am not a runner whatsoever. And, that just the internal win for me, that was a true confidence builder along with many other things. But that really helped my confidence that, I could do hard things and I can clear through doubt and push forward to succeed.
I think what you mentioned there too, as well, that I want to speak through is that you're going to encounter setbacks in your life professionally or personally along the way. And sometimes the setbacks are the things that allow you to move forward for future things, for future setbacks. And knowing that you can get through some really difficult times and come out successful on the other end really is something you talk about that helps build confidence. But also I think that it's about that competitive fire too, as well, that, you want it, that you can do better, especially when you talk about running your fastest mile after this reconstructive surgery on your knee. Like, that is a lot to take in, but knowing that that's happened in your past, I think it helps you in your future too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And another point I think that's important, Kenji, and I know you preach this, is you can't do it alone. So the reason why I wanted to be a physical therapist, at least initially when I was younger, is the role that physical therapist had on me. And what's funny is that physical therapist now, she runs her own PT. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was one of the fastest growing Fortune 5,000 companies. So she's super successful outside of her name's Heidi. She was my physical therapist. But it wasn't without her and Woody and the support of the physical therapist and my family, right? Like you can't do it alone. So even though it's cool to talk about grit and all this stuff, like they put the plan in place. They were the ones who helped ice me. So I think both things are true. It develops grit. You have to work hard, but in the same sense, just like in business and in careers, you can't do it alone.
That's a great point. I think that building a team is probably one of the more difficult parts of our roles as we continue to grow, and making sure the team works cohesively together, which is not unlike sports in many cases there, and utilizing that whole thought process of building a team and helping everyone achieve their roles. I think one thing that you talked about in your origin story is your ability to see and work in so many different areas. Can you talk about the importance of that, getting a better, well-rounded look at what everyone else does to help you do your job better?
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't know if it's needed to be successful, but it's important in the sense of, I think our industry is super unique. I can't think of another, I'm sure there are, where you have so many different components working at the same time between food and beverage, table games, slots, DPS, security, surveillance, beverage, promotions, events. I mean, traffic control. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. So for me, especially with what this platform is about, going to the next level, I think it's important if you want to succeed in this industry, you're going to have some kind of fundamental understanding of how those operations work, because even within marketing, you touch all of them, right? If you're putting together a big special event or promotion, they're all going to need to know the ins and outs of that, but also you're going to have to know operationally what role do they play. And by be able to walk in their shoes, at least to some capacity, it allows you to make better decisions, right? It allows you to be more of an empathetic leader to try to understand the ripple effects, good and bad, of any operational decision you make, even within marketing. So to me, it was at the time, I kind of did it kicking and screaming. I'm not going to act like I went into it just like gung ho, like, yeah, this is awesome. But I knew and I trusted, the leadership there that, it's going to help me. I've seen other people go through some kind of program like that. So it was truly instrumental on, everything going forward.
And I love that, such broad based, trying to understand how other people do and work and do their jobs to make your job better. But I want to talk about a little the origin of this podcast too, as well. Like you're the brains behind the podcast here. I think you might have been you set off the first one and how we were going to do it. And many podcasts are very siloed in what they think. So typically, a podcast regarding casinos would be all about casinos. And we've gone so far outside of the realm in that all diverse fields from, like you said, professional athletes to firemen to, so many different spaces and places. Can you talk about the why you decided that was the direction you wanted to go with these?
Yeah, it's just funny how life works. So I am a big fan of the podcast medium. I know we've chatted about this. For me, why it's such a beneficial platform, and especially that serves me now with 4 kids and, the roles and responsibilities I have today, is it's passive, meaning I can listen to a podcast on my way to work. I can listen to a podcast when I'm walking the dogs. I can listen to a podcast when I'm working out. I can listen to a podcast when I'm cleaning the house, right? And I love books, but if I'm reading a book, I have to zero in, and that's the only thing I'm focusing on. I can get 95% of a podcast and also do something else at the same time. So I'm a big fan of the medium, especially when I started listening regularly in 2015. And like I said, I just had this thought of maybe one day, right? Maybe not myself, but there's some that have done it. But at the time, at least, there were not a lot. There wasn't a lot specifically for our space, for those who might not maybe have a good mentor, or maybe they're not in a great boss situation. That's the beauty of technology. With LinkedIn, podcasts, you can learn from others in a way that you couldn't 15, 20 years ago, right? So to me, they knew that value was there. I just didn't know how, but I thought that'd be a cool idea. Fast forward to 2020. Peter, one of his first questions he asked me when we're in the, and I can't remember if you were in this interview or not, but he asked me, how would you go about developing a thought leadership strategy? And all, like, very serious. and I butchered it. I butchered it. And that's for people listening, like it's for interviews, right? And that's a little quick tip, just be true to yourself, be genuine. I gave some manufactured answer. What I really should have asked is like, why? Well, Peter, OGM, why do you think thought leadership strategy is important, right? I probably would have came to a better answer. But I sat on it. I worked with Serena. We had a lot of talk at the same time. We were recruiting, right? This was COVID. We were expanding. We knew we had to add about 5,000 positions, and we started doing online job fairs. And we did the sessions there, the panels. Sorry, and people loved them, right? You remember people were listening to them. We got feedback saying you guys should do more of these, and then the light bulb went off. And Serena and I kind of worked together. We put paper to pen at the time we didn't have a name. I think I called it, I wish I'd have kept the paper, Building Something Greater Together. And it was podcasts, video series, blogs, content. And that's when it clicked of, hey, I think here's your thought leadership strategy. We can really lead with value in a forum where we not only connect with Yaamava, San Manuel leaders, but we're going to connect beyond, because that's so in the tribe's DNA and that's in our DNA, which is learning and growing. We don't do it alone. We don't do it in a silo. We have great minds within Yaamava and San Manuel, but I know that you and other leaders reach out to partners for advice and others. And that was kind of the jumping point and the idea of the podcasts and the videos and the blogs and everything that is next level. And then we were on our way.
Yeah, in 2020, when we were dealing with the COVID and everything that was happening at that point in time and trying to figure out how we were going to reopen safely, how we're going to do everything, under the new protocols, that was one of those times where you had to rely on a lot of different people from a lot of different fields too. Yep. We had medical advisors from all over the country that were here helping us out, our fire department, our health team. Like, again, how do we do this? And to be able to rely on all of them was key. And I do love that when we speak to some of our partners or some of these other guests that come on, they're eager to come on and share their wisdom about where they're going and how they're getting there. I know you've done several of them as a host. I was going to ask you if you had a favorite podcast that you've done or some favorite moments of podcasts that you've done.
Oh, I can't do that. I can't nail in on a favorite.
It's like picking your favorite kid. We know which one it is. You talk about them all the time there, but I'm kidding.
I'll name a few. I really enjoyed, it was one of the early ones. I think that's why I remember the one I did with Hector Fernandez, because it really was. And I think we agree upon this, Kenji. To me, the most valuable podcasts are the ones that just feel like a genuine conversation. And even though I had my outline, it felt like I was just on the couch, shooting the breeze with the CEO of Aristocrat. And you start to connect like, well, I get it. He's approachable. He's very smart. He's intellect. It seems like he's very self-aware. Like, it was just a really valuable podcast because it felt like a genuine conversation. So I would plug that one for people to listen to. Another one that comes to mind, and this is just on the personal, I reached out to a best-selling author by the name of Joe Polizzi. He's one who formed Content Marketing World, which is a really famous yearly thing. Also author of Content Marketing Inc. and a lot of others. So being able to pick his brain on this podcast about content marketing strategies was just some inside baseball that I think viewers will find valuable, whether you're into marketing or not. And honestly, the list goes on and on. Bronwyn Gregg on some of her stories that she was vulnerable about and shared about, empowerment and hiring. And, there's just so many athletes. Yeah, it's hard to narrow in on a few, but I think the common thread through all of them that I've done, and they're all good, but the ones I would say that are great are the ones that really just feel like a genuine conversation, right? And that, I feel like they're doing a really great job of kind of going to that human level, not being scripted, and connecting. And I think the listeners can feel that when it happens.
Absolutely, and that's the one thing I love about the content of way these podcasts have worked over the course of time. We've gone after some great people that make it easy for us as moderators of the podcast to go, oh, this is super easy because I'm just going to ask whatever the conversation goes and however it flows. And I've learned from the moderator side so many incredible things about these great leaders across the country, as well as some really great tips on, how to be successful in different areas. And those little tiny tidbits are making me better as well. So every time I listen to one of the podcasts, I usually pick off a couple of things to go, wow, I could do that so much better. This is how a tip for me to do it better. Have you gotten like, I guess what I want to put out there is that I want to see if you have some small tips for, like, or even not even tips, but just what do you find as successful qualities that leaders that you've spoken to have? What is the common theme that you see out there?
I think one is genuine. I think that true good leaders understand who they are and adapt accordingly, understanding their strengths, understanding their weaknesses, and adjust accordingly. And you know what you're getting every single day. I think people listening to this, and Kenji, curious to get your thoughts, but I think we've all approached different leadership styles throughout our career. And I think the one thing, at least we could say for the great leaders or the great bosses or mentors or whatever you want to put that bucket, is they're genuine. You knew what you were getting every single day. Now they're human, right? They're going to have ups and downs, but generally speaking, it doesn't matter if they're speaking to someone on the floor as a guest or they're presenting to the highest board possible. There's kind of this through line of consistency. So I think being genuine is big because people are different. People have different leadership styles, but I think if you're genuine to who you are, that exudes. Vision and communication. I think great leaders have to know where they're going. And more importantly, that what the role the team plays to get there. How are we going to get there? Where are we going? And constant communication on that end of how we're going to get there in that vision. Lead by example is another one. I think you really can't lead people. I mean, naturally, let's think about it. And I think a past interview, Bo Bernhard pointed this out. Naturally leading means someone wants to follow you. You can't be a leader if I go walk out that door and I have nobody behind me. So to be a good leader, I have to have people that want to move with me. So I think leading by example is a big way of earning trust. Take risks, be innovative. That's something I've found a common story as I interview these people. I think they're willing to take shots. I think they're willing to lose. And when they lose, though, they're accountable for it and they use it. I think you pointed this out earlier to move forward. And then the last piece I would say on this is kind candor. I think you have to give people feedback. Kenji, you're excellent at this. We could talk about that if we want, but you've given me kind candor and feedback multiple times when I've asked for it. And I think that is a super skill you need because you can't just tell people they're great all the time. If someone goes and speaks, hey, how did I do? Oh, it was awesome. And naturally you want to do that because you don't want to hurt people's feeling. That's a good human nature quality. But to be a good leader, you can't do that. You're not doing anyone service unless you're giving them true feedback that they can continue to improve about. But you could do so in a kind way. That doesn't mean you need to be mean and give it in a way that's, kind of turns people off. You can do it kind. So kind candor.
Those are great, great qualities you talked about. And candor is definitely one of the ones that I'm a big fan of as well, as you know, personally in space is there. And it's important to do kind candor, but I attribute that to, sometimes it's when you have kids, you have to work on kind candor. So that becomes a little more natural, but I attribute it to the lessons I learned from previous coaches in sports. Like my coaches are the ones that helped me understand what really true kind candor was. I certainly had some very militant coaches along the way that maybe aren't the ones that you really want to use as examples, but I had some great coaches along the way that were, it's more about teaching and as opposed to about winning, because if they get the teaching right, winning comes with it. And as I grew up and as I coached my kids, that was the same thing that I talked about for them is, look, we don't have to win every game, but we have to get better every game. And if we get better every game, then we will eventually start winning every game.
Kenji, I want to stay on this point real quick. So from whether you want to use sports or you want to use kind of in the workplace, compare and contrast, because I'm interested and I think this would be valuable for the audience. Compare and contrast maybe that coach example you gave. What does kind candor look like? And then maybe the opposite of that, right? Where maybe someone's giving you feedback, but it's in a way that's not productive to you.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about the feedback, sometimes it's cruel, and you have to understand your audience too, of who you're talking to, because people will take their feedback differently, and every person's going to take it differently. But to tell someone like, you suck, that was terrible, that's not productive because it just puts up all of the red flags about that. When you talk about someone who was speaking in front of a group and they struggled through it, you have to commend the bravery of getting in front of an audience. You have to talk about that. Look, it's not easy. And then two, I think just making sure that you go, look, I was there at one point in time. The first times that I spoke in front of an audience were terrifying. They still are a little bit for me. I do it all, frequently, but it's still a little intimidating when you're up there, and it just takes practice and reps, and you will get better at it. But I'm always about saying, look, you have to meet the person where they're at when you're giving them candor. You have to meet where they're at. You have to understand what their vulnerabilities are. You have to understand how far you can push and how far you can take that, because there's a gentler way of giving candor. And sometimes there is the way that says, look, I really need to talk to you about how do we get this better. Yeah. And I think that's just with any form of, even if it's in disciplinary action mode for what you have to do with the team member. When your team members makes a mistake, yes, it's a serious mistake. You have to make sure that they understand the serious and how serious the mistake is. But you also need to make sure that you don't break them down to where they can't recover from it.
Yeah. And also something too that I've noticed that you're really good at is 2 points. You're quick. And I think that's an important one that I've learned, not only just from you, but even if you watch like the show Hard Knocks, like if you're delivering feedback or bad news or whatever, that might be like, oh, that stings a little bit. You want to get to it quick. Right. And I've noticed that with you, whether it's been with someone else or myself, like, hey, tell me what you mean by this, and you'll provide it. And, the two, just being totally transparent here, the two pieces of advice that have stuck with me, and you did it quick and there wasn't a lot of fluff around it. One was hiring as a people development learning lesson for me. We were talking about a specific position under my vertical. I talked about how we didn't have someone ready, and you were kind of like, that's on you, right? Like, you said it in a kind way, but it's like, in these situations going forward, it's not that you're going to just be able to fill every position internally, right? I know that, but what you were saying is like, we need to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to prepare, to make sure that we hire from within. And the way you gave that feedback was good. And then the other one was, it was the whole, which I'm still trying to get better at, which is the good afternoon, good morning, how are you doing? The small talk, right? Is a D personality and a red for myself, that doesn't come natural. And you add the clues as you get older. I think this is part of getting older and self-awareness is, I would go out with friends and my wife's friends would be like, I think he doesn't like me. And it just, you start to collect the cookie crumbs over time, and it's like, oh, my face, right? And just my mannerisms. I have the capacity to be misunderstood. So especially as I've developed a leader, that was important to hear from you, is like, hey, just drop the work talk for a minute. Just check in with people. How are they doing? Just check in on a personal level. That's been huge and something. So just kudos to you. And just, I wanted to provide that because one, I think we're all developing. And two, once again, I just want to echo something that I've learned from you, and something that you're good at is kind candor when we talk about leadership.
Well, and I will also, I don't want to make this just a compliment fest, but I will say that you have to give candor upwards too. And so my first podcast, we always joke about resting Kenji face or resting Kyle face. RKF is what we call it there, is that sometimes we're in the mode like on a Zoom call, and you can just see what my brain is doing, or I just have a bad resting face, and you're like, why are you so upset at this whole situation? I was like, I'm not. That's who I am. So to understand what I look like when I'm in, not in speaking mode, that's important too, because what sometimes it's the nonverbal skills that will put off a different message than you want to put off. It doesn't necessarily, it's not complementary to who you are. And so having someone come out and tell me that was huge for me, just because you don't think about it when 100%. You're in the moment. Yep. And nonverbal skills are every bit as important as verbal skills are. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we have marketing. That's what marketing's about, is both nonverbal and verbal skills. It's about communicating in many different ways and mediums. And I recognize that sometimes it's really difficult as a leader to make sure that you are running communication out there appropriately for all different audiences. And it can't be one size fits all. You have to try a whole bunch of different mediums. That's really, I kind of believe, what marketing is, what it is when it comes to how do we do what we do? How do we become successful? How do we get creative with things that we do? It's about all of the different ways that we do the same task. And the more ways we get it out there, the more well-received it can be. I think about that when it comes to like some of these crazy promotions that you guys come up with there and the promotions team, you and that team. How do you create a promotion? How do you advertise it? How many different ways to communicate it are out there? And I'm curious for you, what is the creative process for you to do things like this? And how do you work on the communication skills, not only internally, but as well as externally for our guests?
That's a big question. So I'm going to do my
big segue about communication, and it's a really big one. But
I'll try my best to unpack it. So I think number one is, and this is foundational for anybody. I think if you're working on like a small scale project, or you're doing a big marketing initiative, or you're doing a big kind of promotion that's going to have lots of layers to it, I think it's start with the end in mind. To me, that is foundational, meaning, let's just take an example. If we're chatting about, let's take a real example. Last summer, the movie Air came out, which at the time was a huge movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, kind of tapping into the amazing story of how Michael Jordan became Michael Jordan, the sneaker brand and the icon, and what that meeting looked like. A really good movie for those who are listening. And Jen says, and I think this was a very strategic decision to me and Matt, there's Jordan. This has amazing popularity. I want to do a promotion, kind of figure it out. And it was a good kind of first test for me. And what Matt and I did is I used that concept, begin with the end in mind, meaning what's the hook? And it doesn't matter, especially for people in marketing, whether you're doing a billboard or not. I call it the billboard test. If a usual billboard, you have max 8 items, meaning logo, picture, headline. So start with the most simple form of communication, the billboard test. What's the billboard say, right? And so that helps you think through the lens of what's going to actually grasp attention. Because if we can get the billboard right, we can get the mailer piece right, we can get everything else right. But start with the end in mind. What does the end product look like? So for us, it was important to build something that had a hook that connected people. If the idea is to tap into this trend in Michael Jordan fandom, what better than the Holy Grail, the PSA 10 Michael Jordan rookie card? I know you're a sports card collector.
Yeah,
I think there's roughly only 300-ish in the world that are PSA 10. We got our hands on one, right? We knew we could build a whole program around that because that's the carrot. That's the thing we could display on property. That's the hook that's going to make you want to find out more. And then also, okay, we can't just be the card. How are we going to maximize this window beyond 4 weeks? Okay, what if we tap into the actual Jordan shoes, and everybody who wins gets their own pair of Jordan sneakers? And oh, by the way, they could pick whichever ones they want. Free play, cash along the way. And then also, I won't get too into the nitty gritty, but also, okay, what are the promotional entries? How can we build this in such a way that people feel like they have a good shot? Because our database is so large and rich, it's not a one size fits all. We have to be really strategic about, how do you earn entries? So I think the step number one that I always advise people is start with the end in mind. If you could do that, you can always build backwards. From there, you can work on the necessary advertising and awareness, because awareness is a privilege. All of us are busy. Right now, as I'm talking, people are zoning out right now. So it's important that if you're going to put an impression out there, that it has the capacity to hook. And it needs to be done by every medium, between out of home, social, and it's native between every single platform. So one, can we market it correctly? Two, the most important, does it have a hook from a guest interest standpoint? Can they understand it enough, right? That's another thing that we'll do with the promotions team. We'll chop it up and we're like, guys, we just talked for 5 minutes. The guest doesn't have 5 minutes to understand, right? They're not sitting in this room. If we can't put this on a single piece of paper and do so in what I call the Homer Simpson way, where anyone can understand it, a good test is you could give it to someone who knows nothing about the promotion and say, tell me what this means. If you can't do that, then you're doomed for failure. So I think it's important to start with the end in mind, understand the true differentiation, how that draws value to the guest. And then number two, operationally, how do you pull that off in a seamless way so that everyone understands, but also the guest understands in a way that actually draws action?
That's great. I think when you talk about the hook and the way advertising and even communication with team members goes, it has to be quick. It has to be not just timely and quick, but it needs to be quick as I don't have time to listen to a really long explanation. I need to know the quick Cliff Notes version, as I like to call it.
Yeah, long emails are my kryptonite, Kenji.
But yeah, I think understanding that, hey, you've got to be able to get that message out the right way and quickly and simply. It's the MTV generation is what I've kind of run through, is that it's all about these quick clips, and there's really not long storylines that go there. And that's important even for our team members and how they do that and how we lead them. Speaking of the hook, I have a couple of hook questions there, but the first hook is we do a thing called the bigger picture here. And I always feel like these are fun to see because then I get to see pictures of you in a different light than in a suit and tie, as well as the rest of the audience. Yes, I have two really good pictures in the bigger picture. Can you talk about these two different pictures and why and what resonates with them for you?
Yeah, so I mean, we chatted about it earlier, right? And the one on the left here is from my basketball days. So that's our senior year. I'm going to get the first question out of the way. People are like, you guys only had 9 people? No, I don't know. I can't remember. This was a long time ago. We had, like a lot of teams did, you had your JV team, and a lot of them would suit up to fill the rest of the bench. So, I mean, yeah, so that was a team that we had. That team went to the Final Four in state. Once again, not getting into it again, but coming off the ACL meniscus injury, to be able to play, to be an actual important part of that team that, went to the Final Four. We lost to a guy, true basketball nerds would know, but most wouldn't, by this kid, Jared Bayless. He ended up playing in the NBA. He went to U of A. He was one of the top 10 recruits. He was a sophomore. I think he played about 8 years in the NBA. I don't know if he's playing overseas now or what, but he was a superstar back then, and it was a close game. And the picture on the right is, I think the through line here is sports has been foundational for me. So the picture on the right is me finishing a marathon. Before this, the most I ever run was 4.2 miles for the Pat Tillman run. That's in Tempe, Arizona, for the Pat Tillman Foundation. So to go from 4.2 to 26 plus miles was quite the jump. And the reason why I did it was because, I really wanted to challenge myself. I have a bad knee. Obviously, I always told myself that marathons are out, not going to be able to do it. And a light bulb just went off. I heard someone speaking about it, that only less than 1% of people have done marathons. So I was like, all right, we're going to do it. And I was lucky enough. Once again, we talked about team earlier. My wife was gracious enough to allow me. I did a short training period. It was only about 3 months, but taking Saturdays to go run. Towards the end there, the runs were like 3 hours, right? So, something I don't think I'm going to do again. But I think, the one thing between that picture on the left and that picture on the right is just sports has played a constant in my life in different capacities, whether it's going to the gym in the morning or running. I think it's important, whether it's physical, mental, whatever bucket you want to check. But I think it's important to always challenge yourself. And that's kind of remained constant throughout my life.
Yeah, I'm glad you spoke to the challenge part. I think that even in business, making sure that we set challenges up for ourselves and set goals out there. Goal setting is so important in how we can continue to progress. Otherwise, we get sometimes too caught up in the monotony of what we do on a day-to-day. Is that some advice that you would partake on your team members, is like, set a goal, let's help find a way to train and achieve it, like the whole process of the marathon? I mean, God love you for doing that. That's crazy to do that. Like, I don't know how my knees would have held up for that. But the fact is, a guy who doesn't like to running is impressive, but finishing the marathon is also, a huge achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this applies to anybody, in your career, which is, it kind of goes back to that concept of start with the end in mind. If my end goal is I want to finish the marathon, okay, work backwards. How am I going to be able to do that and do it in chunks, right? Build a plan to what that looks like. For me, it was just setting time increments of, I want to run this much this time, this much this time. Being kind of, I wasn't like a super stickler on the diet, but I did kind of trail back certain things and really putting together a plan that helps you get there. So it applies to, you're 100% correct, Kenji, to anything you're doing with the team. If you have a goal, for example, for us in the marketing end, we really wanted to attack communication this year. So, I challenged the leaders within my verticals to put together a plan, right? Knowing what do proper intake, and then kind of put together a plan. And, we had some success, and we also have some things to improve, but I think the approach is the same. You understand your output and, the final destination, so to speak, of that goal. And then you build backwards. You put together a plan in increments of, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to check in, and this is how we're going to measure progress. Measurement's key too, right? So I think even with running or whatever you're doing, whatever goals you have, proper measurement, check-in, and progress to understand, are you moving in the right direction, is critical, especially for what we do, Kenji. I mean, everyone listening to this podcast can relate. Feels like you're doing 5,000 things in a day, and then you blink and it's like, where did the day go, right? So it's important to zoom out from time to time, track your progress, and see, how close are you to ultimately obtaining your final goal.
And you talked about Jennifer and the support of your family in this, and I know that your family is so important to you. How have you been able to, as you continue to grow and responsibilities continue to grow in your job, how have you been able to manage the, home life experience and the work-life balance? How has that been for you? What are the processes for you, and why has it been successful?
It's a work in progress, and that's what I would tell anybody listening to this, especially this platform, right? The more that you take on, there's trade-offs. That is a really important conversation I try to have with people. It's not to scare them. It's not to be doom and gloom. But anytime you say, I want more, you're trading off something, right? So the one piece of advice I can give is, number one, you need to have constant dialogue with your life partner, whomever that may be, or anyone who's close to you as far as within your life, someone you have a real relationship with. With me and my wife building our family, it's constant dialogue on, what's this look like? What are my goals? Kind of what does my 3-month outlook look like? And being really transparent about aligning on what that looks like, because it ebbs and flows. But there's times where, I miss things or I'm not available, but trying my best to, one, just communicate, being transparent about what's ahead. And number two, be very intentional about my time. So even if it's as simple as, hey, we're going to do an offsite, or we need to go to the Palms for 2 days, I'll fly in that morning, right? Unless it's something specific, once again, just intention. If it's, hey, there's a dinner the night before, it's really important you're there, okay, I'll go. But are there those times where I could pick my spots to miss an optional team thing, to spend an extra night with my kids, because the evening's chaotic? Anybody who has young kids, mine are 4 kids, 7 and younger, that 4 o'clock to 7 window is pretty tough. So even if I can get an extra evening in to help out, I think that goes a long way. So just, number one, communicate, over communicate about short-term, long-term goals and what that looks like. And then two, just trying to be real intentional with your time. Another thing is, if I'm off, I'm off. That doesn't mean I'm not available. I still check my phone, but I'm not glued to it. If it's important, someone will call. So if I'm my best at home, even if it's for smaller pockets, and I'm truly present, I'm going to be a better father, a better husband, a better friend. And that's going to show up in the workplace too. So it's the same thing that I approach to the team is, really try your best to be intentional about your time, so that, there's balance is not really the word. I know other people talked about harmony. To me, it is. If one's working well, the other is, and trying to, have both move in the right direction, I think is key.
I love that you talk about the sacrifice between, you're going to have to give and take. It's like a full cup of water is the easiest way I like to describe it as, is that if you put something in, something else is coming out of the cup. So you need to make sure that the mix is exactly where you want it to be. And communication is key to, a great marriage or, relationship, as well as what you're doing here at the office, and figuring out how to manage it all. I used to look at my cup and I was like, well, the sleep part is like, used to be here. Now it was up to here when I had kids. Like, there was none of that. There was very little sleep. And now that the kids are grown and older, like, sleep's come back a little bit there. And that's certainly nice, but the sacrifice is there. And that's the hard part, is to know that you have to have a sacrifice to get the priorities in your life. I think understanding what your priorities are important too, because even in careers, not all positions and not all goals are set equally and at the timeline that they are. When I started out, I wanted to be a GM so fast. Like, that was, I wanted to move up ranks. I was going to do everything I could. In retrospect, looking back, I would have probably pulled it back a little bit And I think I missed a few years of my kids growing up that I wish I could have got back. Knowing how to manage that, knowing where to balance that relationship out better would have made me a lot happier as a human being throughout my entire life. But I'm going to ask you, if you had to give some advice to your younger self, what would you give to you?
I'm gonna come back to that, but Kenji, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, and I think it's important because someone might have just heard you say that, right? Of, maybe if I could look back, maybe I could have took my foot off the gas a little bit. But do you feel like if you would you be where you're at today, as far as GM, kind of in the same spot? If you could do the time machine, knowing what you know now, if you would have eased up a little bit and maybe had more interactions with your kids, do you feel like you would be where you're at now?
I actually do. I think that I could have prioritized certain things differently. I certainly am always a guy who's got my foot on the pedal when it comes to work. That's just who I've been for my entire career. But I think there's times where I could have let someone else drive. I could have delegated a little bit better as opposed to being the person that wanted or had to do some of these things. I think I was busy doing some tasks that I felt were more important that maybe weren't. But I thought was there. I could have done it a little bit differently and still, I think, gotten to the same finish line. But I couldn't do it without the same attitude and drive that I had. I would still need to have that drive, but I would have just need to channel some of those directions differently to get to where I am now. And quite honestly, in some cases, would I trade some of that now? If there are some moments that I know I missed out on as a dad, as a young dad, that I would have maybe traded some of the victories along the way in business for. And okay, so maybe I'm not at a GM spot. Would I have traded it for some of those moments? I think sometimes yeah, that would have been cool. Because I think that understanding now that I'm older, the priorities of that, and that, look, there are things that you can't relive again, and you won't be able to see those things. And thankfully, I did get a lot of really great moments with the kids over the course of the years too. And now that they're older, I wish I had them all. That was the thing. I wish I could have got them all, but it would have been impossible to still do what we did and to be able to, raise a family on one income, to be able to do that without some of those sacrifices. So in retrospect, some of those sacrifices I think were worth it. Some of them I think I probably could have done a little better.
Okay. And I appreciate you answering that, because it's the common question I ask people, especially as I have young kids. And it's one of the most common answers I get is hey, I wish I would have, spent more time with my kids, found ways. So that's why, I like to, it's important that we have these real conversations. That's what this platform is about, to understand those trade-offs. And then also too, I hear you, and that's what I'm trying to implement, which is, pick my spots, attend things that I can, but realistically, unless I'm going to have a career pivot, I'm not going to be able to attend everything. But what I do want to do is, when I'm there, that I'm dad, that I'm full dad, that I'm present, that I'm husband, right? And I don't always succeed at this, but that's my goal, right? And it's a constant flow, like water, but hopefully more times than not, I'm able to be there for the important things. So thank you for saying that. So advice to my younger self. I think two things come to mind. Number one, and I talked about this with another interview I really liked, which was Jonathan Murtaugh of Vayner. It's kind of just relax, chill out. Grace is a powerful word. Just allow yourself grace. I think a lot of people who want to be successful kind of have this accountability iron, which is a very valuable trait. It's something that I look for when I'm hiring, but it can come at a cost if you do it too much. Meaning, if you beat yourself up and a negative voice inside your head, oh, you should have known better, and what, just chill out. Just allow yourself some grace. My goal, hopefully over time, is to be like an S&P 500 stock. I'm not going to be constantly every day better. That's the goal, but it's going to ebb and flow. But when you zoom out far enough, am I 10% better? Am I 15% better? Am I 20% better? Right? That's ultimately what I'm trying to strive to do. So number one, just grace. It's okay. Chill out. And then kind of on the same token, and I wish I would have found this earlier, is mindfulness and something that's really helped me is mindfulness meditation. I only do it maybe 3 times a week now, but there was a pocket where I was doing 5 to 6. I used to struggle a little bit with anxiety, had some panic attacks. I haven't had one in years, but it's not that monkey mind anxiety goes away. What mindfulness meditation allows you to do is just simply recognize the thoughts and emotion, right? So that you can respond rather than react. So I wish I would have understood too that we all have the monkey mind. We all sometimes are not present. We all have an inner voice sometimes that's not very productive. That was there for survival. Oh my gosh, there's a saber-toothed tiger. Watch out. And then like you repeat that over and over and over in your head. That was done for survival. That doesn't serve you in a 2024 world where somebody said something and you took it wrong and your ego is saying, well, how dare they? Did they think this? And blah, blah, blah. Like, so I think just the concept of mindfulness and understanding we are not our thoughts. We can simply observe our thoughts and be able to respond rather than react. I wish I would have understood that younger too. So I think it's just be kind to yourself, allow some grace, understand the traffic in your head. And I already knew this at a young age, but especially, I'm sure you agree with this, relationships are everything. Even for an introvert like me, it's slightly introverted, I say, but definitely a little more introverted, relationships are everything. You don't know, I think Steve Jobs said this, you don't know kind of the path to success, whatever that looks like for you. You can't connect the dots looking up. It only makes sense looking back. So I always say this when I talk to new hires too, the person sitting right next to you 10 years from now might be offering you a job. So be kind. You don't know how it's going to play out, and add value. I think that goes a long way.
I believe we've built a really good culture that matches that here at Yaamava over the course of time. And it is part of that relax and mindfulness, but it's also that looking forward. It's a great quotation that you put out there, but understanding that looking forward is also generationally looking forward. And I want to tap into, with you being a tribal member at Salt River and being part of that community, what the role of being a tribal member has had on your career as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've asked that because it's important, going way back, I called it the family business because it is, right? They own Casino Arizona and Talking Stick Resort. So naturally I had an in, I had a degree, but the degree was paid for by the tribe, right? So it got me that I think the tribe here says the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, a hand up, not a handout. It's kind of the same philosophy, right? Like if you're willing to work, we'll give you a hand up, but we're not just going to give handouts. So the opportunity for school, the opportunity to have a job, the opportunity to do the Pathways to Success program where I talked about all that shadowing, that was only available. I don't know if it's changed, but it was only available to tribal members at the time. And I did that program twice, which included the executive development program in Reno, which was huge, right? So like the hand up on the tribe side has been huge in my career. What I will say though, on a personal level, and I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but it actually came from the tribe here, San Manuel, was so kind to show us the 5-part documentary series that they did. It was so touching to show. And honestly, if to tell their whole story, it'd have to be a lot longer than that. But it was a very powerful piece as far as their evolution, what they've gone through, their philosophy, how they've given back. I mean, it was just so powerful. But one of the things that one of the kids said in the tribe, and apologies, I can't remember the name, but he said, and he's probably, if I had to guess, somewhere between 16, 18, young kid. And he said, I was ashamed to tell people that I'm tribal because people, essentially how I felt, which is, oh, you're just giving casino money. And, you don't, and I got that a lot as a kid, like you're not tribal, you're white. And, you just get casino money. And, I didn't want people to know I was tribal. I didn't want to think anybody was giving me things. So I'm going to work hard to prove people. And that was the wrong lens to think through. So kind of advice to my younger self too, is be proud of who you are. And I am much more, I was never ashamed. Deep down inside, I've always been proud to be a Total Odom and, a tribal member, but I kind of shied away from that side. As I've gotten older, I've just been naturally curious and fascinated to do more, to learn more. I've disclosed this. I am on the Salt River Business Development Board for the tribe. So finding ways to still stay in touch, even though I'm removed, it's just this natural calling because as a kid, I kind of shied away from it. And then now as I've gotten older, I've really wanted to understand about my roots and that side of my family. And honestly, just the history of tribes and what they've been through, it's incredible, and it's not out there enough. And that's why I'm so proud to work for an organization like this that is tribe led, tribe first, and the way that they operate and give over 300 million back to the community. I mean, it's fulfilling in a way that I think a lot of people don't understand, but when you work here, you do, and it's very powerful.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of the philanthropic arm of what our tribe does here, and just again, despite how they were treated in the back in the 1800s, like the documentary speaks so vividly to that, and to see where they've come and that they understand they still have stewardship to their ancestral lands, and that they want to make the areas around them better. That's they treat us like family, and that's the difference between corporate gaming and tribal gaming. This is the first tribe that I've ever worked for. It's the last place I will ever work, provided they want to keep me around. I hope that they do, because this is, again, it's perfect for my beliefs, my cultural values as well. But it's one of those where I recognize now what I was missing in my life when I was working for more of a corporate strategy piece there, that it's not about necessarily what we're doing and how well the business is doing. It's about what we're doing as a human being and a human race, and how we're helping each other and growing together. And so it makes me feel like my job has much more value and meaning. And that's super important to I think anyone who's got a job, to be able to find passion, but also find something that speaks to them. And so when you're out there looking, find a place that fits who you are. That definitely helps out. My God, I'm looking at the clock right now, and it's like we are at near the end of our time here, which is again one of those great things about the podcast. I have like 10 other questions I want to ask. Maybe we'll have to have a Kyle Anderson part 2, but usually we, as you know, we close this out with 3 tips that you would want to provide to anyone who wants to take their career to the next level. I'm going to turn it over to you for those 3 tips.
So I knew this question was coming, obviously, because it's how we close. And originally I was workshopping like 10 different tips. I was like, okay, you can't do that. But I tried to narrow it down to, I have a bonus tip. I tried to narrow it down to 4. One that we've already talked about, which is start with the end in mind and work backwards. I think especially we're talking about that question, which is take your career to the next level. What's the tips you provide? Okay, what is that for you, right? And it could be short-term and long-term, but start there and then understand the trade-offs. And if you have someone significant in your life, have those open conversations, right? I think it's really important that you lay it out on the table. One concept that I've heard that I've done in small increments is record, repeat, delete as part of this same tip, which is, write. And I'm a fan. I did this in 4-year periods is a way to do it. So 4 years from now, essentially what you would do is write down the big goals of personally, professionally, development of, 8, 10, call them what you want, but put them down. Right? The next 4 years, I want to accomplish this, and this is who that future person is. Repeat it. I mean, and you have to look at it every once in a while. You can't just write it and then forget it. And then delete anything that's not serving that purpose. And it's amazing. I'm due to do it again. It's amazing how much of this stuff happens. And it's not just wishy-washy vision board. Like, I think it's a really good exercise. Record, repeat, delete. 4 years from now, where do you want to be? What do you want to do in personal, professionally development? And you'll be amazed the things that you start to accomplish. And another one as part of this same tip is reps removes doubt. So you got to put the reps in. It's like this podcast, Kenji. I know we joke about it. Like if you listen to the first episode I did with Peter, that interview is bad. It's real bad. I've told people that I love them on this podcast. Like things have gotten real weird as an interviewer. But, you got to get the reps in. And I'm just so fortunate to work at a place like Yaamava, San Manuel, where, we allow people to, as long as it's not a massive mistake, right? We allow people to grow. So just fortunate there. So that's tip number 1. There was a lot there. Tip 2, be curious and take action. This has been, I don't like to say things I do well or to talk about myself, but I am naturally curious, and that has served me well. I think every great leader has that in common. How can we get better? How didn't that work? Why is the guest line so long? Why is this drawing my attention? That's creative. Why is this trending right now? Like so many great things start with why. And if you lead with curiosity and not judgment, then no matter what, if someone says something to you, like really be curious in an open way, I think good things are naturally going to happen. It opens opportunity and judgment closes it. So and take action. You can't just be the person who says your great idea to your coworker. Take it to your boss. Your boss doesn't listen. Take it to your boss's boss, right? And do so in a way that truly shows, hey, I've noticed the guests are not liking this. Here's something I think we can implement. It's going to take this. And here's the resources it's going to take. And this is why I think we'll be better on the other side. I think if you do that, you're naturally going to open yourself to opportunity. So be curious and take action. Double down on your strengths and differentiation. So true, I think in the casino, hospitality, entertainment space, you need to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, but you got to understand your differentiation. Like, are you super duper project management? Are you super duper organization guru? Are you the super creative person? Are you the one who can lead a room? Like, what are your differentiation points, and make those shine? Don't have any glaring holes. If you have something you need to work on, get it, but double down on your strengths, understand why you get energized about that thing. Because ultimately that's how people are going to notice you. And the last one, the fourth tip, it's probably the most important, is be kind and add value. I think above all else, like if you're kind, you're winning, right? If you're kind, you open the doors for people, you say thank you. You know, it's something I'm trying to get better at with my schedule is leadership by walking around. Bob Bogner said that in a past podcast, and it really resonated with me. Just saying hello. Like, this is on my agenda today. I'm literally just going to walk around, give donuts, maybe attend a meeting I don't regularly do. Leadership by walking around, be kind, add value. And the key thing with adding value is it's not expect something in return. That's not adding value. If it's, I did something nice and then I expect you to reciprocate in some certain way, you know, that's not truly adding value and being kind. So I think being kind and adding value, even in a career sense, is giving without the expectation of something in return. And also, if you do that, naturally, it's going to be ROI positive when it comes to your career.
I love those tips. Those are great. I'm a big fan of those. Like, again, be kind, adding value. That last one really resonates to who I am, and who I want to be. I always say, like, my version is like, be a good human being. You know, if show that you care, and again, it's when you are walking around, take the time to listen and make sure that you understand where your teams are coming from, and make decisions based off of where they're at too as well. I try to always remember how it was when I started in this business and where I was at, and the decisions that I make as a general manager. I think about how it would affect me when I was just a front desk clerk or a brochure room clerk or whatever, you know, position I was on the line. That's the most important piece to it. If you make decisions like that, keeping them in mind, being kind, understanding what their thoughts and their values are, taking their advice, listening to what they have to say, the sky's the limit. And you've proven that the sky's been the limit. You're continuing to grow, Kyle, and I really do appreciate you taking the time today to speak with us. I wish we had more time. I have so many more things I want to ask, but I'll ask you outside in the office area later on. But thank you again for being here today and sharing your wisdom. Kyle Anderson, everyone.
Thank you, Kenji. Appreciate you. Appreciate everyone. Hope you find value. Thank you. Have a good day.
Check out more episodes at thenextlevelcareers.com.